Hello, and welcome back to the Five Elements podcast. And today's sponsor it's a big one. It's my great white whale, if you will. I've been reeling this bad boy in for some time. And the fact that we finally, this humble little project in this humble little podcast studio could reel in the big fish, it means a lot. And today's episode, it comes from the bottom of my heart to say that today's episode is sponsored by gentrification. And this is something that I hold near and dear to my heart because every time I see a neighborhood that's been thriving for a long period of time, I always can't help but think about the economic opportunity that we've left on the table for what? For community, for belonging, for connection. These, you can't quantify these in terms of dividend returns and capital gains. People like to talk about community, and that's fine, whatever. But community doesn't pay for your second yacht. You know what I mean? But if you can gentrify an entire neighborhood and extract resources and wealth from that neighborhood while displacing the people that have been there forever and really feel a connection to it and have generations of love and memories built there, you can really build wealth. And we forget that. And sometimes we'll see families that live in close proximity to each other where the grandparents can help the parents when the parents are busy working. And there's this connection within the family and the community, and people feeling that they belong to something bigger than themselves. And we can overvalue that so much that we forget about how much money could be made if we just paved it all and built expensive luxury condos for people who were originally priced out of already upper middle class neighborhoods. Like, what about the people who live in upper middle class neighborhoods that are priced out over time? We don't like to think about them. Instead, we always think about low income folks. And we care about low income folks on the show, but we also need to care about high income folks, and they're not talked about enough. So it's with gentrification that you can support the mobility of the upper class. And if the upper class can't move up, then I don't want to live in that world. Everyone likes to talk about the bottom moving up. What about the top moving up even more? I'm more of a raise the ceiling type of guy, as opposed to bring the floor up. Floors are gross. Floors are dirty. No one likes to sleep on the floor, but we all want to be on the ceiling. And if we can raise that ceiling, you know what? That's something that I think we can all agree with is near and dear to everyone's values deep down. So next time you see a bougie little coffee shop replacing affordable housing in a previously diverse neighborhood with plenty of history behind it, smile. Just know that $6 drip coffee is going to be paying for someone's dream fourth yacht. And if that doesn't put a tear in your eye and a twinkle in your eye as well, because I said the eye thing first when I should have said it second, then I don't know what will. You're a heartless Grinch if you can't sit back and watch little Billy with his fluorescent blue sweater vest and a beautiful pair of Sperry's that he's going to grow out of in 1 month because he's a growing boy, but he still needs $1,000 pairs of shoes. If you can't watch him express the utmost exuberant level of joy on that yacht, then I don't know if you have a soul. And with gentrification, you can support those dreams. And that's why I'm so excited that today's episode is sponsored by such a great cause. And yeah, I'm getting honestly, I'm getting a little bit emotional. So I'm gonna move on to what's next. And what's next is, if you actually want to support me and if you want to support Five Elements Coaching and what I do here with evidence-based coaching, evidence-based fitness, and empathy-based coaching. I got my own tagline wrong. That's how emotionally jerked up I was over thinking about how important gentrification is. But on a serious note, if you are looking for support with your fitness goals, right? You don't want a drill sergeant. You want someone who's going to be there every step along the way to make fitness simple for you in a way that you can actually fulfill and stay consistent with. I will build your workout programs customized to whatever gym access or home gym access that you have. It's going to be with a workout plan that you can actually do. I'm very collaborative in this approach. So that's something to keep in mind. And if you feel like the gym's been overwhelming, I work with a lot of clients who are like, I never want to go to the gym. I have some stuff at home. I'm like, okay, let's see what we can do there. And then maybe eventually they come to the gym, but sometimes they just work out at home forever and they like it because they're like, you know what? I always had this idea that I had to go to the gym. But coaching is going to help you understand that fitness should be more flexible. And that's partially what I do as well. I do nutrition coaching. So if you do want to change your body composition, whether it's building muscle, losing a little bit of body fat, I do that, but I do not do that at all costs to your health. So if you do look at fitness through a myopic lens of you only care about losing weight and by all means necessary, I'm probably not your guy. But if you care about that in a way that you can sustain long term, I am definitely your guy. So I offer that with online remote coaching. It is very accessible. So it's not something you need to be in a gym for, right? It's not something that you have to be in a time and a place for. The flexibility of it is one of the biggest perks. And you can work with me in a remote sense. And you can learn more about that by looking in the show notes where there will be a application for online coaching and you'll see if we're a good fit. And there is a no expectations had call that you can also fulfill. So if you fill that out, we'll hop on a call. We'll say, hey, what's going on? Can I help you? If I can help you, I will say, let's do this. And if not, I'll refer you to someone else. But there is no expectations with that. So if you are curious, I do say, fill that application form out and see if it's for you. And I can help you get started on achieving your fitness goals as soon as possible. So that's one way you can definitely support my work. And if you're looking for that support with your fitness goals, great option for you. Secondly, you can rate, subscribe, and share this show wherever you listen. So if it's on Apple Music, you can leave a review. Spotify, I actually don't think you can, but you can leave a 5-star rating, which will help me a lot. And share this with some friends. That helps quite a bit. And if you're really liking the episode, go that one extra step, take a screenshot, throw it on your story, say, listen to this sick ass podcast. And this podcast goes to something, you know what, that's very important, which is gentrification, deforestation, big tobacco. Like I'm on the right side of history. And if you share this podcast with your friends, you will also be on the right side of history as well. And that's kind of it for me shilling for big corporations or even for myself. And that'll all be in the show notes for anything that you do need, aside from the actual gentrification part. That will not be in the show notes because unless you don't know, that's a bit. And I bring that up because my dad, funny story, my dad, after my last episode, which was sponsored by landlords, and again, very important to me. My dad, I was on the phone with him, and I go, "Hey, Dad, what's going on?" And he says, "Yeah, hey, Dale, I actually just talked to my landlord." And I'm like, "Huh? Oh, that's pretty funny. That's pretty funny." And he goes, "What do you mean?" And I'm like, "You're joking, right?" This guy goes, "No, I thought you were sponsored by landlords. I thought it was pretty cool." So I reached out to my landlord. I told him how much I appreciated him. And then I sent him the podcast saying, "Hey, my son got sponsored by landlords. Check this out." Now, my dad's landlord probably now thinks one of two things. My dad's the dumbest man on the planet. Not true. But sometimes he can really apply for that role. And secondly, that my dad's fucking with him. And that's the most likely outcome that my dad's landlord probably thinks. Because first of all, there is no landlord sponsorship. My dad, for some reason, thought that was real. But I really wish I could have been a fly on the wall when my dad's landlord read that message and hopefully listened to the intro and realized that it was a complete bit and that my dad was most likely just messing with him. But when my dad's naive, loving, caring soul, he was being genuine, and that makes it so much funnier. So anyone who doesn't know, that is a bit, and is a bit that I do for me. I've heard some people don't even like it. I love it. Keeps the mind, keeps sharpening the saw. You know what I mean? Because I actually don't even plan this before I got here. I just get on here and I freestyle it, and I'm like, what's today about? And today, gentrification was on the mind and the soul. With that out of the way, we're going to do some roses and thorns, and then we're going to get today's episode with Kate Solovieva. I said that wrong because she's Russian. And in the episode, she teaches me how to say it in Russian. And I still can't say it. But you know what? I did my best. Now, roses and thorns. I'm going to start with this one today because last weekend, my great uncle had passed away a week before that, but his funeral was last weekend. And there was a lot of roses in that, actually. He was a 94-year-old man. He lived a full life. He lived to see 5 great grandchildren, which most people cannot say. And this man was also I think 1952, he was the tennis champion for Uganda because my family lived in Uganda before Idi Amin took over and there was an expulsion of all South Asians. So that's where my dad, my cousins, my uncles, my aunties, that's where they all lived for most of their life. Then they moved either to England or they moved to Canada. But my great uncle was a high level tennis player, so much so that he was the number one ranked tennis player in Uganda for singles in 1952. He then had a beautiful wife, two kids, five, no, four, two grandkids and five great grandkids. So massive family. That's just one side of my family. My family is really large, if you can't tell. So the rose there was that we all came together and over 300 people came to the funeral. It was beautiful. It was sad. We grieved together, and that was actually a rose. Obviously, it's a thorn when you lose someone in your family that you love, but one of the reflections I had was being in the community that my family is in, the Goan community. It's so tight knit, and it was actually beautiful to be surrounded by so many people, hear the stories. And at that age, it's obviously sad, but there's more of a component of celebrating someone's life. And if anyone lived a full life to celebrate, it was my great uncle. And it was a rose. And that's how you should grieve. And that's how you should mourn. You should do it with family. You should do it with the community. You should do it with the people you love. And you should laugh. And that there was some laughs. There was a lot of tears, but there was a lot of laughs thinking about the memories of my great uncle and the memories that everyone else had with him. And that's one of the beautiful things about grieving together, is that you get to hear different perspectives from how someone else experienced someone you knew, but you only know them through your own lens. And when you grieve together and you hear about how other people had these experiences with that person, it paints a more broad, full picture of that person that you love. And you know what? He was 94. I'm only 30. So there's 64 years that he lived before I was even born. And I have no idea what that man was like then. I can only hear stories. But these times bring together and you can hear these stories. And it's very beautiful to see the love and the support that the community came out and that my family had in that time of need. And that was obviously, it was a thorny rose, but it was rosy at the end of the day. But the thorn was along the same lines. And I've talked about this before. It was that my mother had passed away last December, but there was no funeral. It was a very fractured death, I'll say, in the family. Like, it actually didn't bring us closer. It kind of drove everyone apart even more. And this funeral had me thinking a lot about that, where there was all these beautiful moments where you get to say goodbye and you get to reflect on these things and you get to grieve with each other. And for reasons that I'm not going to get into in full detail, we just didn't get to have that when my mom passed. And it was a reminder and it hit me pretty hard. And I've been reflecting on it quite a bit since, of like, that's something that something I thought I was missing, but I couldn't truly put a finger on it until I got to experience it in a different realm of with my great uncle passing. It was like, wow, like this should actually be a beautiful thing when you have the space to celebrate someone's life and grieve together through the good and the bad, right? But we didn't get to have that with my mom, and that was tough. And that was kind of reaffirmed this weekend of something that you miss. And it's just, there's no real, I don't know if there's a lesson in that. I'm just kind of venting right now. And sometimes that's what a rose and what a thorn is. You're just sharing. There doesn't always have to be a lesson. It can just be a pure reflection. But something that I do know, it made me really value the time that you do get with these people that care the most about you on this planet. And since then, I've been in that state thinking about that. And it's just one of those lessons that sadly you continuously learn, because there will be times when you take people for granted. That's the idea, that you never take anyone for granted or any time for granted, just isn't realistic. But it's good to have these moments where you can sit back and think about what really matters. And at the end of the day, it's corny, it's cheesy, it's been said a million times, of family, quality time, spending time with the people you love. That will be the thing that you cherish the most when you pass. You will never think, I wish I would have spent that extra hour at the office. I wish I would have spent that extra hour just kind of escaping or avoiding things. You would have been like, I regret the time I didn't spend with the people that I love the most. And that's something that you just continuously will learn. So that's the thorn. These are rosy thorns. This is a smorgasbord of roses and thorns scattered all over the place. And that's actually a good metaphor for what death is and what grieving looks like in general. So with that out of the way, we're going to get to today's episode, which is going to be with Kate Solovieva. We're going to be talking about why everyone struggles with the basics. And this conversation was quite good. It actually went places I didn't think it was going to go. And that was interesting. She's a very interesting person. I know I said that twice, the word interesting, but there wasn't really another word I could use to describe her. Very very authoritative energy that I digged. I was like, you know what? I can see why you're a good coach. Authoritative with respect, but also playful. That's kind of the sweet spot of what I think being a good coach is, because it's not all seriousness, but it also can't all be play. It's towing that fine line, and Kate does a great job with that. She works for Precision Nutrition, so this is for an article that I'm writing for Precision Nutrition on this exact topic of why everyone struggles with the basics. So if you struggle with the basics, even though you know what you should be doing, you know you should be eating highly nutritious foods, you know you should be exercising, you know you should be getting your sleep, and you're like, why don't I always do it? This conversation will likely help you with that. So stick around, listen to the full interview, and at the end, I'll probably just say the same thing I always say, like, thanks for listening. But if you want to hear this sweet, salt of the earth voice again, this humble voice that I have, that'll be at the end. And one thing to keep in mind, this is funny, but the cord to my microphone unplugged during the episode, so my audio is trash. And if you don't like listening to what my voice sounds like through a tin can, you might not love this episode. But good thing I was interviewing Kate, so she was talking quite a bit, and that's great because my audio was not good here. Stick around and enjoy this episode with Kate Solovieva about why it is so hard to master the basics. All right, cheers. Okay, Kate, welcome to the podcast. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Now, I'm going to try to say your last name because I know a lot of folks seem to struggle with it if they're not native Russian speakers.
This
But
is the initiation of every podcast host. You must go through it.
Solovieva.
That's not bad.
That was with a real straight face you said that, though. You're like, that was
Yeah, it's a solid seven.
okay, give it to me.
It's a Solovieva. It's been misspelled by immigration services many years ago, so no native speaker of English has any chance in hell of ever pronouncing it correctly.
Oh, wow. Okay. So what's funny, my last name, my grandfather did it to our own last name for business reasons because my last name
Yes.
is DaCosta, but it was originally D apostrophe Costa. And
Hmm.
my family came from Africa. My dad and my grandpa and like that side of the family. He's like in the phone book. There was something to do with the apostrophe wouldn't show up at the right time, so he put DACOSTA, and now that's our name. He essentially Ellis Islanded our own family for his sales job, but every single person has a different spelling. So mine is
Yeah.
DACOSTA. My dad's is DA space capital COSTA, and my sibling is DA capital COSTA. So no one really knows what our last name is. So on some level, I can empathize with that.
That's amazing. That sounds like such a universal immigrant story, like the some sort of morphness, right? Like of the last name, either because it was misspelled accidentally or intentionally, or to kind of make us assimilate better. Like I love learning about that. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it is a very common one. So how would I say your full name?
Like full.
Yeah, give me the real stuff.
Oh man. Okay. You would say Ekaterina Vladimirovna Solovyova.
Wow. Yeah, that I don't have the
No.
genetic skills for that. I'm
So
I'm
thank you
learning
for
Spanish
asking.
right now, and it's like I'm learning like a new skill phonetically, and it's interesting how challenging it is. It's like trying to brush your teeth with your opposite hand. You're like, I should be able to do this, but why can't my brain organize itself to say the thing out loud that I know what I'm trying to say?
Well, it's like we were all kind of accustomed to making certain sounds and shapes with our mouths as we grew up, right? And I mean, we've lived in Netherlands for a period of time, and it was so fascinating to me to learn to speak Dutch, but then also to realize that there was a moment when my face and my mouth started to be able to make the sounds that were previously inaccessible, right? Like, and every language has those. Like, so if you are learning a different language, there's always going to be those letters or sounds that are probably not present in your native language. And those are always like the big challenge.
Wait, you speak Russian, Dutch, and English?
I used to speak Dutch. The languages tend to go away when you don't practice them. So I bet if I maybe went back for a year or two, maybe it would click back in. But yes, I used to speak Dutch.
Those are three very random languages to also speak. That's
That is true.
incredible. I don't know if I've ever heard of someone being able to speak all three, but
That's
that
true.
does bring me to the first question I want to ask, because kind of like a general intro, but I mean I read through part of your bio and it's very fascinating. So you grew up in Siberia, Russia, correct?
I did.
Okay, so tell me about that a little bit because that's just generally interesting, and then we'll kind of segue into like more relevant conversations
I
of
mean, hey, the snow, the political prisoners, the wolves, the mafia, all the things you hear.
that's all it was. Like when did you move here?
I moved to Canada in 1998, so
Okay,
it's been 20 plus years now.
so were you a kid when you moved here? Then I assume.
I was 15.
15. Okay, so then it was from Siberia to the Netherlands to here.
We tried to immigrate to Netherlands when I was like 12 or 13, and then we returned to Russia and then went to Canada, and Canada became home since then.
Okay, that's just super. You don't talk to someone who had that immigration story that often, so that's super interesting. But now you are a coach. Correct me if I'm wrong,
Mhm.
because I know you don't even like that term too much, but you were a psychology professor before.
In a previous life, yeah. So I taught college and university level psychology courses, mostly to folks in police foundations programs, engineering, and massage, like so at various colleges around the Greater Toronto area, and also at my alma mater, which is University of Waterloo. And then after that, I switched to coaching, and it's been, I think, 12 plus years now.
Okay, so I mean, obviously, there's a huge carryover between psychology, like teaching psychology and coaching clients. What made you make that switch?
That is such a great question. Well, I think teaching psychology, I I loved it and I actually miss it. But what teaching did at the college level anyway, it put me in a role of an expert,
Mm,
right? It was me talking at an audience. I I kind of tried to shoot for edutainment, right? Like I tried to be as entertaining as possible so folks would not fall asleep in my lectures, and really like prided myself on trying to gamify my lectures as much as possible. But at the same time, I started going through some changes myself where I actually have discovered precision nutrition at the time as a client. I've started experimenting with changes in my nutrition. I've started getting deeper into a movement practice. And for me, that was yoga at the time, and really started kind of seeing the impact that those changes in lifestyle could have. And then I started like trying to sneak all that information into my teaching as much as I could, like just no matter how tangentially relevant it was, I would try and find a way to like really discuss the importance of health habits or movement or nutrition in my classes. I built assignments around this, like term papers on behavior change, and it was just so much fun to see the impact of those changes that the students were able to make. Uh, I found it incredibly rewarding. Like there was just something about combining theory with application that I really, really loved, and I wanted to do more of it. And also, to me, I found teaching kind of the same courses over and over felt pretty repetitive, right? Like it's the students always changed; they never got any older, but the course material was the same, and I would kind of try and keep it fresh as much as possible. But at the same time, with coaching, we always have a brand new person in front of us, so I think it also just felt more challenging to me as well.
So you went from kind of combining some of the coaching principles of PN and everything you had learned into your lectures, then kind of feeling like I've been doing this a little too long. I want to go more to the client side, it sounds like. And then
Yeah,
you,
I wanted to delve into the application
yeah.
more so than the theory. I wanted to apply myself and I wanted to help others apply. And that was 12 years ago. And to be honest, that hasn't changed one bit because that's exactly what I feel like I'm most passionate about. It's kind of translating the knowledge into action, the theory into action, the knowing into doing, right? Like knowing is great. Like we say, knowledge is power, and it is in many ways, but knowledge in itself is not nearly as valuable or impactful as knowledge combined with actually doing something with that knowledge.
100%. Because I have the people that I look up to most in this industry tend to have a combination of all three. Because I do find if you are, say, you're a PhD and you're very well read and educated in your field and you're boots on the ground doing the research of it, I find some of those folks have never actually worked with a person. So the application of that can be very limited. And some of the folks that I find to be the most effective in their communication of how they kind of get their ideas across are people who've been, what's interesting about you mentioned this, they've been a coach, they've been an expert, and they maybe also have been a client, where you actually seem to be, you have been all three because you were a precision nutrition client. I think you stuck that in there.
Mm-hmm.
You've received support and good coaching, hopefully good coaching, but also it's probably valuable to receive not good coaching at the same time. You've been a coach and you've been an expert all at the same time. And when you have all those experiences wrapped into one, you do have this dynamic understanding of what it takes to change a person's behavior in the way that they want, other than just, you know all of the theory and you have access to the latest journals that can give the best ideas, but you've never actually seen them in practice and how messy it can get when a real person is in front of you.
I think I'll push back a little bit on this because I see that quite a bit in kind of like health and wellness, is that um, we often confound experience and expertise.
Mm,
Right? Like, so when we're talking about somebody who works, lives, and breathes academia, and what they do is theoretical research, their job is to do theoretical research. Like, their job is not to help real people apply the findings of that research, right? Like that's why they have people like you and me, hopefully, right? Like who can be evidence-based and help implement those things in real life. And I think also both of those things are great to have. Like, do we have expertise in a certain field? And do we also have direct applicable experience? But they are two different things where, the example I often use is if you have cancer, your oncologist doesn't have to have cancer.
yeah, no, no,
Right? Like, they can have expertise in their field of study. They can be an expert. They can be a specialist on this thing. Now, mind you, some oncologists do have direct experience with cancer themselves. Does that make them better or worse? I actually don't know, right? I think it makes them different, right? Or another example I often use is like, well, if we have somebody who is a drug addiction counselor, we might have some drug addiction counselors who have had addiction themselves and who have never been addicted to anything.
yeah,
Well, is one better than the other? I also don't know because I actually think they would deliver very, very different experiences to their clients, and there will be like pros and cons to each.
yeah, no, that makes sense. Because I mean, the cancer one's a very obvious one, but then where
Mhm.
my mind went was, but someone in the cancer support group should have had experience with it, because then they can actually attend to the real feelings of, hey, what is it like to go through this? As we're the expert in the actual field, to your point, they're not there for the day-to-day support for that person. They're there to treat the actual problem, which would be
Well,
cancer.
let's take it to kind of like the more of the area that we're in, right? Like, so health, personal training, nutrition coaching, because the one specific example that comes to mind here is how do I show up as a coach for different types of clients? So if I'm working with two different clients, one of my clients lives in a very large body, right? So they are 300 plus pounds. And they want to move better. They want to feel better in their body. They want to move more freely. They want my help building habits of intentional movement, etc. Another client is struggling with disordered eating, right? Maybe binge eating, maybe body image issues. So when I'm working with these two clients, it's actually quite interesting because I have direct experience with one of those things, but not the other,
Yeah.
right? Like, I have never been 300 pounds. I don't know what it's like to live in a body that large. I can't kind of have that I've been there relationship. And with the client with disordered eating, I do, right? I've been there, and in some ways, I know what it's like. And I'm using air quotes here for folks that are listening because we never really know what it's like. So I'm actually going to be a better and worse coach for both of these clients in different ways. Because for my client who lives in a larger body, the fact that I've never been in their shoes in some ways makes me a more objective coach.
Mm, that's a good point.
I am showing up as an impartial party, as an objective party, as a compassionate partner on their journey without necessarily being pulled by my own emotional elephant of that topic being triggering to me personally.
Yeah. And you're not going to project as much of
That's right.
as
That's exactly it, right? Like, so, and when I'm working with somebody who is experiencing some disordered eating, right? Like, on one hand, there is that relatability there, which like makes the connection, the rapport easier. I could much more easier, again, quotes, read their mind because in some ways I've experienced a lot of the things they have experienced, but it can be a triggering for me in many ways, right? And I can then be less objective. I'm just more kind of like I have more stories about their experience. It's very tempting for me to like feel like I know what they're going through, where that's not necessarily the case at all, right? And that actually can make me worse coach. So there is that like balance of like been there versus not, because I think sometimes we very easily assume that the experience of having been there automatically makes us better coaches for someone.
yeah.
And
No,
I think it's not the case.
yeah. No, I would agree. It doesn't automatically make it.
Mhm.
But in your case, having been through so many, you've worn so many different hats in this space that I do find it very interesting because I assume it has informed a lot of your coaching, going from being the expert in a teaching setting to being a client, and then also being a brand new coach. Like, what was that like transitioning from being an expert as the psychology professor to being a brand new coach? Was that daunting or was that a smooth transition?
I think my transition to coaching was probably more unique than most, just because I have spent a very limited amount of time coaching folks on my own. Because the way I sort of describe it at the time, it was my failed attempt at self-employment at the time, where I gave notice I gave notice to the colleges I taught at, letting them know that I'm leaving to pursue a career in health coaching and kind of opening my own business at the time. And then literally weeks later, I was snatched up by PN, who gave me an offer I could not refuse. Right?
Oh,
But that means that for me, the transition into coaching, like where I have been coaching people at the time, right? But then I transitioned from kind of the very beginning to coaching a large group of folks at the same time. So in some ways, it was christening by fire,
yeah.
and a lot of reps under my belt really quickly, which was an incredible experience and also a difficult one.
Yeah, I would imagine because most coaches when they start, it is that grind to build up, and
That's
you're
right.
there's so many experiences where you're like, I don't even know if I want to do this. This is so much. I'm just getting rejected here and there. But you pretty quickly were absorbed into what it sounds like was a great role, and you were working with a lot of people pretty quickly.
Absolutely. I think my experience in some ways was flipped on its head, right? Because a lot of coaches do struggle with like the business running aspect of a business. Meanwhile, I actually could spend a period of time focusing on nothing but coaching, right? Like just the sheer volume of like getting those coaching reps in.
Yeah, which is incredible because you actually have to sharpen the saw instead of just
That's right.
stress about actually building up the clientele instead of just servicing them. So what do you do with your coaching now? Because I couldn't quite pin it down based off your website. It was like you coach coaches, but you have experience with coaching clients. Like, give me an idea of where your coaching practice is at now. Because I'm curious.
Yeah, that's a great question. So right now, I am with PN. I am the director of community engagement at Precision Nutrition. I'm a master coach at Precision Nutrition as well. I run our online communities for the certified coaches and our certification students. And I also do run my own coaching practice where I mostly work with health and wellness professionals. And it's a small handful of folks that I take on a couple of times a year. And that's where we mostly work on things like deep health. So aligning their own habits and behaviors with their values, because again, I tend to do for them what they do for other people.
Yeah. No, okay, that makes a lot of sense. Because I did remember you worked for PN directly, but then on your website it seemed like you work more with coaches. And again, it sounds like you just like to have your hand in a couple buckets.
I'm a generalist.
Yeah, you really like mixing it up. And I can see that based off of your history of like even when you're teaching in a in a college where it is a syllabus that's kind of recycled, you're thinking, I gotta mix this up a little. I gotta implement some new stuff, which is awesome because then you're consistently learning new skills and growing from that and kind of challenging the status quo of, well, this is just how we do things. And I assume if I had a company you worked for me, you'd be someone who's like, "Well, we can do things differently. Like, why don't we explore?" Which having those people around always valuable. Otherwise, you just kind of get completely set in your ways.
I think, yeah, the lack of ideas has never been my issue. And I think when it comes to coaching, so like again, like I have been coaching pretty much nonstop for over a decade now. To me, um, I'm very intentional about my work kind of complementing each other, right? Because with my role with PN, because I do support so many coaches in our communities, to me, it's crucial to also be actively coaching myself at the same time, because otherwise I feel like I'm moving away from my craft. Right. Like, so I need to be in the trenches with you to kind of know what it is you're going through at the same time, right? Like, so they're running a business, I'm also running a business, right? Like they're trying to balance multiple buckets and multiple things, and so am I, right? Like the young kids, the mortgage, but also like a job and a business and all of the things. It's like, yes, we're all doing that. We're in it together.
Yeah, I do recall you saying you thrive in chaos. It
I
sounds
do.
sounds like that's the truth.
Mhm.
So, Kate, the last question I want to ask before we get to the actual topic today is I got to know about that Trinity costume because that is one of the most badass pictures I've ever seen.
That's a good one, eh?
Who took that? That thing looks like CGI made.
No, it's an actual unphotoshopped photo. So I've been hearing that I look a little bit like Trinity for a long time, and I love that movie, The Matrix, which ages me significantly right now because I saw it in theaters. It's a really cool
That's
movie.
awesome.
And it made it on my bucket list. So I wanted to dress up as Trinity for Halloween. Now, I don't do anything half-assed. If I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it with my full ass. So, like, we were talking, I had an appointment with a hairstylist that morning with pictures of Trinity. That's what we're doing. So, my hair was cut short and dyed black. I had the specific model of sunglasses and like the trench coat ordered beforehand, and I had a photographer booked, and it was the same photographer that actually did my wedding photos. And we it
What a
was
contrast.
it was such a contrast, but he was a perfect person to do it. And we did those photos actually in Toronto's Chinatown on one of the rooftops.
Okay.
So people usually see that photo and they say, "Oh my God, that's a poster." I say, "There's a CN Tower in the background."
Yeah, no, I mean, I could see the Santa. I was like, that's definitely, and I know you were in Toronto. So I was like, damn, that's a real photo. It's for anyone watching on YouTube, I'm gonna put a picture of it up because describing it like really doesn't do it justice. And I do respect going all in for any Halloween costume. The
Right?
last year I went as Ted Lasso and
Yeah.
I had the full mustache, like I shaved
Oh,
off
I can
all
see
this.
that.
Yeah.
That's the way to do it. I mean, how can you even how can I dressed as Tomb Raider one year, and you better believe it, I had brown contact lenses because she does not have blue eyes. Like,
Yeah,
so,
you do not.
it's the details that really drive it home.
Well, I actually, did you ever watch Ted Lasso?
I know I haven't. I hear good things though.
I made the logo of the
Oh,
out of cardboard, and it actually looks really good. And
perfect.
I taped it on, like I looked so identical to the guy. But I remember I was like, it's so much fun to go all out. So I got nothing but respect for that. But let's get to the actual topic today, because today we're gonna be talking about the basics and why they just seem to be so hard to actually consistently do. So the first question I'll ask is, let's talk about the basics in general, but I think I want to start personal. So how has your relationship been with mastering and maintaining the basics? And whatever what struggles consist in there, like what has helped you with locking down any sort of basics that you've succeeded with in your own personal habits?
Yeah, let's spell this out for people because it's one of those things where like everyone sort of knows what we mean, but I want us to get clear and specific anyway.
Mhm.
When you say basics, what do you mean?
The basics of what you know you should do to achieve your goal. So fitness wise, I think it's a little more clear, but it would be specified to any individual if they're career
Mhm.
based, etc. But say if it's fitness wise, because you grew up exercising, like focusing on new fitness or no? Like when did that come?
No, I never did like competitive athletics or anything, not until my mid 20s actually.
So it sounded like as an adult when you were a professor, was that when it kind of started for you? You started applying the PN stuff?
Yeah, yeah, I think so. Like once I started, like I kind of discovered yoga, started moving regularly. Yeah.
So before that, I assume you were aware, like, hey, I should be eating a lot of nutritious foods. I should be exercising. I should be prioritizing sleep. So say you're aware of those things. What was the struggle for you to implement them, if there was a struggle, of course?
I think the struggle back then and the struggle now are probably different, but the list of basics is the same, right? Like, so I think if we ask 100 people, and it doesn't matter if they're in the field or not, and say like, just write down the list of basics that we should all do, that are widely assumed that we should all be doing, we would probably have a list of 5 to 10 things that are very similar, that would be overlapping. I don't think we're going to see like awful surprises on there. People are going to put something about moving and exercise. People are going to put something about vegetables and broccoli. There's going to be some sort of sleep and stress management and meditation thing. And so we kind of like intuitively know what they are. I think answering that question from where I am today is probably easier than from 20 years ago, because I don't know if I remember my own mindset 20 years ago. And I think I've also moved into a lot of those quote unquote basics from perspective of weight loss and like body image issues and disordered eating and kind of like what we should look like and what I want to look like. So I think that the drive was also probably not the healthiest. When I look at that now, and if we were to ask this question, like, why is it so hard to do the basics? I would say that it's because we keep calling them basics. Like, that's really not helping.
Into that, right?
Sorry?
It's almost like a negative connotation to that.
Well, maybe, yes. I think that's it, right? I think you're kind of getting at it where it's like, wow, if they're basics, why on earth am I not doing them, right? They're so freaking basic. And the thing is, if we actually look at every single one of these quote unquote, I'm going to keep saying basics, they're incredibly complex
Mm.
set of behaviors and habits. We're not talking about any one thing. We're talking about dozens of habits and identity shifts and mindset shifts and time management skills and energy management skills and the art of self-coaching, right? And of collecting information and experimenting and tweaking. And all of that is just somehow dumped into a bucket called basics. And so there is this big assumption that these are really simple things that we should just all be doing, where they're actually not that simple. And that's why you and I do what we do. Right? Because again, if it was that simple, I don't know that we'd have a job, to be quite honest. Right? And that would be one context under which I would be totally okay being out of a job. But so far, I have not been at a risk of being out of a job anytime soon.
Yeah, it would be nice if you're out of a job because the world becomes a healthier place.
Totally. That'd be amazing.
Just automate it out. That's the
Yeah.
worst case. The best case is, well, people just got healthier. But so you're talking about how people might not have a true understanding of what like they might be undermining what the basics are because the language you use around it, when in reality, if you were to achieve the basics, if your mindset is, well, they're just basic stuff, I should be able to do it, doing it probably wouldn't be as internally rewarding as if you acknowledge the complexities that went into doing the basics. Like if I actually am able to exercise consistently, if my internal voice is, well, everyone should be able to, it's not that big of a deal. It's just a simple thing that I should be able to, as opposed to reframing it of, listen, like fitting in exercise, given my schedule, I have to attend to my family, I have work obligations. My energy reserves are just kind of low given the amount of that I have to give out. And I still managed to, through my own time management and focus and consistency, to get to the gym 2 times per week. You can do the same thing and view it on opposing through opposing lenses, depending on your relationship with kind of what you think you should be doing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think a lot of my job is helping people arrive at a more objective view of reality. Right.
Mm,
And I think this is where the same thing would apply. Like it's not that we want to view these behaviors as basic or complicated. It's more that we want to view them in more objective light. Because to say they're basic is just as misleading as to say they're impossible,
mm,
right? Like, but they are more complex than it may appear. And just like when a client says, I suck, I suck, I suck, and I fail at everything I do, my job is not to bring them to a point where they say, I'm awesome, and I'm awesome, and I'm amazing at everything I do. It's to arrive at a more objective view of reality. The
mm,
objective view of reality is probably not that you suck at all things all the time, and nor that you're awesome at all the things. It's probably somewhere in the middle. And I can't say how many times and how many different situations that clients have brought to me have have been boiled down to meal prep,
yeah.
right? Like me and my husband are fighting. We peel it back, we peel it back, we peel it back, meal prep. I'm irritable in the morning, I yell at my kids. We peel it back, meal prep, right? Like, I don't have time to exercise. We peel it back, it's freaking meal prep, right? And it's not because meal prep is somehow magical, but because a lot of the habits and behaviors that we want to incorporate, they actually have kind of like similar roots in time management and actually breaking things down into doable tasks, right? Because otherwise we arrive at kind of what I call like a nap problem, like where every parent listening will relate. It's this like, you have like a 1-year-old kid and they're down for a nap. And it's like, okay, oh my God, I have 45 minutes. What do I do? Do I meal prep? Do I exercise? Do I clean the house? Do I watch a movie? Do I relax really, really quickly? And before you know it, the 45 minutes is over and
Because
you
you
haven't really done any of those things, right? Like and that's kind of the issue with a lot of the, basics as well, where we don't have them planned out cleanly enough to actually make them possible. So I use this example. I gave a talk years ago in Florida at a conference full of personal trainers and coaches. And I asked, like we were talking about building habits. I asked, can I see by a show of hands in this room how many people here have worked out this week? And there was a bit of a chuckle in the room, and every single room went up. Every single hand, sorry, went up, right? There's like 40 people. Well, of course, it all went up. We're talking about personal trainers and strength coaches. Every single person in that room has worked out that week,
yeah.
right? And my point was that the room that we were in was filled by people who have been doing this thing for many years. Now, if we contrast it with the number of problems that a beginner gym goer has to solve before setting their foot at the gym, it actually becomes clear what the difficulty is in terms of like kicking off with the basics, because every single one of those people probably has a gym subscription, has gym shoes, has a gym bag, has some sort of like water bottle that they always take. Every single one of those was a decision at some point that they had to figure out, buy, sort out. Meanwhile, if I'm just a regular average person who feels like they should really start working out, How do I do that on a random Tuesday?
Yeah. Because so in this case, because I always think of those as like action steps that pay
Yep.
dividend in the line, right? They're not habits you can like having a gym membership and having all of those tools at your disposal that you can immediately use to make the habit of going to the gym easier. They're not consistent habits that you have to keep doing. They're almost
That's
like
right.
one time fee you got to pay to kind of set
Totally.
yourself in line to make that an easy choice. Make it the obvious choice. Yeah, I'm going to go to the gym. But for someone who's not been going to the gym, they might still only see A to B is I'm not going to the gym right now. I need to start going to the gym. And they might
Yep.
think it's a one-to-one movement.
You
For
got it.
for the trainers, it is because they have everything in play to make it A to B. But for
You've
the
already built. You've built the ecosystem, you've built the infrastructure. All you have to do is just do the thing,
yes,
right? Like, so if I tell you, Dylan, you go to the gym, you're going to know what that means. You're going to go do your thing. And if you tell me that, I will do the same thing.
yeah.
Meanwhile, for a person who's new, we actually have to view it as a project. And in many ways, we have to help
Oh,
the project manage it. Like, so what are the different, things, the one-time things that have to be checked off? Like, how do we build this infrastructure for you? How do we build this ecosystem for you? Because, you can't do meal prep right now if you don't know what to meal prep, how to meal prep, or if your fridge is empty, right? Like, and again, we have to like peel it back, walk it back to kind of like what is the actual next logical step.
so what you're talking about actually, something came to my mind. A habit almost graduates to become basic. Starts
That's
off as a project and then
yeah.
graduation for because for me and you right now, working out is probably a basic thing because I know how to do it. Even if I don't have a program, I know how to go into the gym and just have a good workout. I have a gym membership. I have my gym bag is sitting on like this vent right beside my door, and everything is in it. And that's not because I grinded to like make. It's just like out of habit. I keep that gym bag there, and like this today when I went to the gym, I grabbed the bag and went, and it was a mind like the amount of energy it took for that and effort was nothing. Right, I was on autopilot doing that, but it had to graduate to get to that point where now that's a basic decision. But if it's a new client, like there's 10
No,
steps I have before I could do that.
and then maybe our task here is to actually help them make it basic. Because again, one of the things I help people do quite a bit is build a habit of intentional movement.
Yeah.
Right. And when we talk about building a habit of intentional movement, like I use a very specific approach. I use like a 30-day challenge approach where I ask people to move intentionally for a set period of time, 30 days in a row, every single day for 30 days.
Does that
Now,
include
say that again.
does that include just an intentional walk, or does it have to be
Well, that's a great question that you're asking, right? Because this is where the exercise comes in making it basic enough to actually make it applicable to the person in front of me. Because if somebody is starting from a sedentary level, or if you, Dylan, wanted to do a 30-day challenge where you exercise every single day, right? Like your setup is probably not going to look the same as somebody who has injured themselves 4 years ago and hasn't exercised since, right? Like, so typically I set it up where the duration of time is 5 minutes, 10 or 15. Like those are kind of the choices depending on where they're starting and what they're feeling like, um, right? And then you are moving for 5 minutes every day, or 10 or 15, whichever you chose. Every single day for 30 days, we write a menu of what counts as intentional movement. Meditation could count if we so choose, right? Like, because it's might not be intentional movement, but it's an intentional kind of self-care act in that same realm and bucket. And I always kind of like sometimes get into, fights with people on the internet. It's like, but meditation doesn't count as movement. It's like, but that's not really the point. The point is not for us to be absolutist here. The point is to help people start building an ecosystem for intentional movement and intentional self care. So, and then what we're practicing here, what we're helping clients practice is this militant consistency, like stupid militant,
Mm.
Like, just no matter what happens, I don't care if you're traveling from New York to Chicago to Boston in that same day and there's like 4 airports in your day, figure out how to get your 5 minutes of intentional movement in.
Yeah. And that can only be done if it's obviously like on the lower end, if it is digestible in a dynamic way where like if you lay out that day, because if you said it's got to be an hour at the gym, it's impossible on that day. But there is this flexibility you provided of 5, 10, 15 minutes, kind of pick your battle there. And I assume it could also be flexible where, hey, like when you're at home and you got the whole day yourself, maybe it's 15 because you have that time. But you got travel
Well,
day, maybe it's 5, maybe it's 10. But then they have the ability to move as their schedule moves as well. So it's not just a rigid, I got to be in the gym for an hour a day, which I feel like a lot of people still have that. I have clients that come to me still that are still like, I should be working out an hour a day. And I'm like, where'd you hear that? And it's usually the internet or someone told them that. But the idea of doing the 5 minutes breaks people's brains sometimes, I find, because like that's not enough, even though it's
there is um there is an overarching theme there, right? Like the coaching theme. And the theme is make it impossible to fail. Like set
yeah,
up the goal in such a way that makes it impossible for client to fail. Because you said an hour is impossible. Nothing is impossible. People do 75 hard, which includes, 45 minutes outside, no matter what, rain or shine or freaking thunderstorm, and a workout. It's an hour and a half. People do it every single day for 75 days. It's possible. It's doable. Even if you're in airports, like do burpees in the airport. I don't know. But it's more about, again, making it appropriate
mm,
for the person in front of us and making it impossible for them to fail, because human brain hates to fail,
yeah,
absolutely hates to fail, and really loves to succeed. Because if I have a person that I'm working with and they make their 5 minutes, intentional 5 minutes every single day for 30 days, and most of them do, at the end of that month, they are now someone who have exercised every day for a month. That is freaking incredible.
their identity is like it's shifted a little bit at least to being someone who
Absolutely.
I know I can do that.
Absolutely. And I say this every day. I say, let's go out and find 100 people on the street and let's ask them how many have moved intentionally every single day for 30 days in a row. Two?
Yeah,
Three? You just did that. You just did that. You just exercised for 30 days in a row. So in many ways, what I'm doing here is I'm taking this, the hack that we all know. It's like, just put your running shoes on, right? Or just do one push-up. We've all heard that. But the hardest thing is to actually do the thing. This is the actually doing the little thing and going over the mental drama of 5 minutes is not enough, 5 minutes doesn't count. It's like, give me a month.
well, how do you help them with that? Because that's something I see a lot with clients where so for example, if I have a client who has this idea that they should be training 3 times a week for an hour, and I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, I understand you think you should be doing that, but how has that been actually going? I'm like, I almost never do it. And I go, okay,
Right.
what if you do 20 minutes 3 times per week? Now, very commonly, they're like, that's not enough, right? So you chunk that down even to 5, 10 minutes. How have you helped clients overcome that barrier? Or what is a common like objection you get to that where it's like 5 minutes isn't enough? Like walk me through that process.
Well, I think the key there is enough for what? Because enough is a meaningless word without a reference point, right? It's like when somebody says, like, you're too tall. Like, that's not a thing. Like, too tall for what? Right? So, if a client said to me, like, I want to exercise, 3 times a week, 1 hour each time. Okay, cool. Let's take a look at the last 2 or 3 weeks. Have you been doing that? No. Cool. How come? And we really want to figure out the how come, right? Like I think most coaches drop the ball there a little too soon, right? Because the client says, well, I just don't have time. Yeah, that's not good enough. Like I actually need to understand what exactly does I don't have time mean? Like where, at what point in your day, like when are you up? When do you wake up? 5 a.m. Okay, 7:30. Great. And then what happens? Like walk me through your entire day and show me what that day looks like and at what point the decision is made that you don't have time to work out.
Yeah.
Like, do you see how granular we get?
Yeah.
Right? I really want to make sure that I understand what is the problem here that we're solving for. I don't have time is not a problem. That's a throwaway sentence. Like, that does not give me enough data. That's like a client tell me I have a knee injury. That doesn't mean anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I need so much more information, right? Like, it's like, great, tell me more. So we kind of get a sense as to what the barrier is. And if I were to suggest then, okay, well, what if you work out 3 times a week, but 20 minutes each? Here's the trick. I actually would never suggest that to a client. I actually kind of make them come up with their own proposed frequency, right?
Okay.
Like, so the way I approach it usually is I ask people for their vision of what their like truly actualized life looks like in terms of movement and nutrition. Like, if we were working on movement specifically, let's fast forward 6 months or a year. And if at that point you are moving your body in a way that just checks all the boxes for you, health wise, strength wise, joy wise, whatever those boxes are, tell me what that looks like. Most people have actually a pretty clear picture of what that looks like. And I could never draw that picture for them. Like, I have no idea what's going on in their head. Like, some describe kayaking and some want to participate in CrossFit competitions. Great, like, right? Like, help me understand what that vision is. And then we have a very clear picture of where they are today. Most people intuitively understand, like, because people are smart, that they can just jump to their vision. Like, I'm sedentary, I haven't worked out for 3 years. And in my ideal vision, I'm hiking every day and I'm doing CrossFit 3 times a day or 3 times a week, rather, right? Like, most people intuitively understand that we're not just going to jump there tomorrow.
Yeah.
We can then start building a bridge backwards of what does that look like? How do we start making little steps towards that?
Mm.
Right? And often the first goal is to just establish the consistent frequency of movement. And that's where I can bring them back to like my kind of 30-day challenge approach. Right? Like, so, well, 5 minutes is not enough. 5 minutes is not enough for what? Well, it's not enough for weight loss, but that's not the goal. The goal is to establish a habit of intentional movement. Once you do that, we'll talk about weight loss. So you're
Yeah.
right, 5 minutes is not enough for intentional like weight loss, but it is most definitely enough to help you build a habit. And that's what I want to do.
Yeah. It's building the infrastructure. It's at least you're laying down the first bricks for you
That's
to
right.
build the ecosystem or infrastructure, whatever word you want to use, that would allow you to become the person that would achieve this specific goal, whether it's intentional weight loss, being able to kayak or whatever. But you need to set down that foundation in general.
And you notice how that gives us 4 weeks of experimenting and tweaking.
Yeah.
Oh, you want to join a gym? Great. Let's use this 4 weeks to join a gym, look into a gym, find some running shoes, buy a gym bag, right? Like, meanwhile, all you have to do is just 5 minutes of exercise. You're not doing 1 hour workouts and also trying to figure all of that out at the same time.
Yeah. Because so I think I've explained this to clients before, and I think people tend to forget about it. I myself do. But when you take on a new task, the learning curve obviously is quite over. It's daunting at the beginning because you're trying to do a bunch of new things at the same time. And you'll get into a rhythm. But there are the preparatory steps you need to take in order to make it a smoother sailing operation. So whether it's going to the gym, right? It's not just you start going to the gym, you do have to prepare everything to make that an easier habit. And in the case you used, I think that'd be fantastic for someone struggling to actually get there consistently is, well, for the 4 weeks, you're going to be almost like preparing yourself to start going consistently by doing 5 minutes of intentional exercise, whatever it might be, or 10 minutes, doesn't matter, whatever they pick on that menu. And then by the time the 4 weeks is done, you have a couple of tasks I need you to do as well. And that's get a gym membership, get a gym bag, get any clothes you would need, have a water bottle, have everything ready so that when you actually go, it's a smooth operation. Because I think you and I have both had this experience with a client where their first time they try to go to the gym, almost it's like they hit every red light on the way there and everything goes, they weren't prepared in the way. And like that's a learning lesson too. But it is something you can account for. And a good coach always kind of accounts for. We can't avoid like every ounce of turbulence, but we can definitely prepare for the most common types of turbulence that clients tend to hit when they adopt a new habit or goal.
Well, and we are working against a lot of like false beliefs and assumptions, right? That folks come to us with through absolutely no fault of their own. So it's sort of like, well, you know, whatever it is, like if I have a knee injury, I can't squat, or I have to work out at least an hour, or I must be sore in order for the workout to be effective. So like there is a lot of undoing as well. Then it's like, well, what does that mean? Like, and how has this worked for you in the past? And what if we try it differently? It's
Yeah.
like, what if you didn't have to be miserable every time? Such a radical concept.
I feel like a lot of people really think that about fitness. It's something that you have to be miserable. Like it has to suck. It's almost like Buckley's. Like it tastes awful because it works. Like there's that same mentality of like, well, if it's not horrible, is it really doing anything?
You know what's so funny is that the horrible and the awful, or maybe let's call it even just unpleasant, is not necessarily where we think it will be. Right? Like I had an exchange with a client. Well, I had exchange a number of times. If we were talking about, exercising, like moving, going for a walk, and she was saying, it's like, well, like in the summer, I don't really like going out first thing in the morning, but then later on it's really hot. But then in the evening it's buggy, right? And one of the things I said, you're right. And there's not going to be a perfect time. So it's almost like it will suck sometimes in different ways. So pick a way that you want it to suck. Do you want it to suck because it's hot, or do you want it to suck because it's buggy, right? But you notice that there is an interesting thing here, because what we're taking off the table is the option not to move.
Which also sucks.
Which, I mean, it can. I think a lot of people surprise themselves when they actually can get a workout in or a walk in that doesn't like hurt or suck. But in some ways, that also doesn't go away. Like, I'm sure you've been working out for many years, and it's not like every single workout is freaking like puppies and rainbows. Some of them suck. But what you have taken off the table as a healthy person that moves their body is an option to not move your body. That's not an option.
Yeah.
So boohoo, like if you get injured, if you break your ankle tomorrow, I highly doubt you're going to stop training. It's
No.
going to suck because now you can run, you can do this, but you're going to work around it. You're going to modify and adapt because once again, you've taken the option of not moving off the table. And in some ways, like this is where like I am a client-centered empathetic coach who is a hard ass on certain things, right? Because
Yeah.
that's where that rigidity needs to come in,
Yeah.
right? Like, yes, absolutely. You can only move for 5 minutes. You can walk, you can meditate, but by golly, you're going to do something.
Okay, you're making me want to move right now. I've been sitting for an hour. I don't know what to do.
Sitting here way too long. Yeah.
No, I do get that because when it comes to once it's off the table, but you are still flexible within it,
Yes.
it's that you want everyone wants to feel like they have a sense of autonomy. But I
Yep.
also do think humans don't want as much choices as we say we want. It's almost
Yep.
like we want constrained autonomy. And that's what I
Totally.
thought about when you said, here's your menu, 5, 10, or 15, pick your poison. Where if I say five, I'm like, you know what? It's my choice. I chose five, even though you really gave me the options. But if you said pick any time, right? And you can, if also you can pick none. I now have 1,000 degrees of freedom and I don't know what option to make. As where if you constrain those options, and in this case, you're talking about not moving is ooh, my voice just cracked. Not moving is off the table, right? So you're moving. I don't care if it's a minute, but you're doing that. I'm going to be like, okay, well, I'm going to do so. I got to pick my poison in there, and it might not be awesome to your point, but I will often get surprised, and people will often get surprised it doesn't always suck as much as you think it's going to be. And then sometimes it does. And you also make peace with that through repetition. You're like, yeah, you're right. It's not all sunshine and rainbows. It's not going to be the funnest time, but it's also not the worst. And I do generally feel better after, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, and I think the autonomy is a big one here, right? It's like, well, I don't like working out, then don't.
Yeah.
Like, you don't owe it to me to work out. Right. And that's the part that I think throws people. It's like, but like, I don't understand. Like, if you don't want to work out, and this is, I remember a prospective client asked me that once. She said, Kate, I really hate exercising. Can you help me start exercising? I said, absolutely not. That sounds horrible. Like, everything about it sounds awful.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Like,
Yeah.
I'm not in the business of helping people do the things that they hate more. Let's just
The
not.
worst review ever. Kate helped me do more of the thing I hate the
That's
most on the
exactly it.
planet.
Like, I
By
don't want that review. I don't want that work. Like, there's just no. And I think that's interesting because once again, there is that assumption, right? Like, whereas like, well, but you're a coach. Like, of course, I had a client who said, like, you will never make me give up my Diet Coke. I said, I would never ask you to, right? But there is that.
unsolicited, she came at you like you're never taking this away. No.
That's right. And I think that right away, right? Like, we have assumptions about like certain things that we like, we do, we're attached to, and also it's like, well, you're a coach, like, you're going to tell me to not do this, or you're going to tell me to give up certain things. There is going to be a little bit of that where I think sometimes coaches go too far the other way, and we end up in this like client centered, like, well, what do you think? Well, what do you feel? Well, whatever you want. It's like, that's not really it either, because you are showing up as an expert.
Yeah.
And there is a reason when, if you're choosing your duration of exercise, I say 5 minutes, 10, or 15. Because if you tell me 45, I say 45 is not an option that I have provided. You can be as autonomous as you want, but I'm also not setting you up for failure.
Yeah.
And my experience as a coach tells me that 45 minutes is going to set you up for failure. So I'm not on board with that goal. I don't have to be on board with every goal that clients throw at me just
Yeah.
because it happens to be theirs, right? Like, because me helping them with their goals also has to keep me in my ethics.
No, I've had that with weight loss before too, where I've had clients where I'm like, listen, I know you're probably gonna do whatever you're gonna do. I'm almost doing harm reduction here, where I'm like, I'm not going to help you with that goal. I'm gonna help you try to have the healthiest relationship with food that I think you can, healthiest relationship with exercise, and encourage these things. And I have had clients where I'm like, I know, and I've told them I'm not actively helping you with weight loss. I don't think it's a great idea for you right now, given the circumstances of your life, given what's been going on, maybe your history of dieting. But I'm going to offer what I think is ethically sound and sound with what I think your best options are, which is just like prioritizing exercise, eating enough food, et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, I'm like, I know they're really counting every calorie and trying to be in this deficit all the time.
They're exercising their autonomy.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's not our job to make them never do that type of stuff, but staying within our kind of ethical framework of what we think is best at the same time. Um, I got another question because I think we're only one question in, and this is my favorite kind of podcast is one question. Everyone knows the rules, so I'm happy this stayed on brand. Um, but so we've kind of established a complicated breakdown of what basics actually means, right? Because it's not as simple as we've talked about. But keeping with the layman understanding of like basics, when you're working with a client, what has been one of the most common thing you've seen that gets in the way of them being able to stay consistent with the basics?
Yeah, I'm like muting and unmuting. There is quite a hard rain where I am, and maybe where you are too.
Oh,
But
it
we're
is raining. Holy
Is it
crap.
raining? Yeah, it's like really heavy pours, so I hope folks cannot like hear the droplets here. So I think that the biggest common factor, if we were to kind of just boil it down, it's lack of prep.
Yeah.
It's lack of prep. And the prep can be either literal, like logistical prep, like I am going to. I have a little index card in front of my sink, like right now as we speak. And it has 4 things on it that, like, if I do them at night, right, they make my morning easier.
Yeah.
I try to do those four things, but I also know that if I only do two of them, it will make my morning easier. If I do none, the morning is going to be just that much more chaotic and like not in a good way.
Yeah.
Those things are coffee is ready to go, right? Like French press, measured out, whatever, it's like ready. The one kid's lunch is done, the clothes are laid out, and
Yeah.
the dishes are washed. Like it's not super complicated. Like those are the four things. And that is the logistical prep. There is also like the mental prep where I had an exchange with a client recently where she's in the middle of doing her like movement challenge of doing like 5 minutes every single day. And we knew that in the upcoming week, she was going to have 2 days that were going to be extra busy because her nights are spoken for. Like her nights, they have social engagements, they have like a class, they have a lecture, an extra meeting. So usually they'd be able to just wrap up work and just have dinner and then like fit in exercise at some point. So knowing that, I said, let's think that through and let's look at your day. And when we looked at her day, we found out exactly 2 slots on those 2 days when exercise could happen.
Yeah.
It either could happen between 7 a.m. and 8 a.m., or it could only happen like 5:30 to 6:30. That was it. What did that mean? I said, if you don't get the exercise done in the morning, it means it has to be done in that other slot,
Yeah.
or you're not getting it done at all. Right? And simply that walking through, like this is one of the things that seems actually really basic. It bulletproofs that future action against failure.
Yeah.
And there is a question I use that kind of very directly gets at it. Like as soon as we set a goal, as soon as we set an action or a habit, I actually ask. I say, okay, you just decided that you want to do yoga 20 minutes every day for the next 7 days. Tell me what's going to get in the way.
Yeah.
Like, what's going to get in the way? Look at your calendar, think about your calendar. What do you have happening? And immediately they look at the calendar like, oh, so my kid's birthday's on Saturday. It's going to be chaos, like 30 children at my house as of 10 a.m. in the morning, cake, the whole thing, like ponies, like jugglers. It's like, okay, so let's think through the Saturday. Oh, I have to get it done first thing in the morning.
Yeah. I I've had this exact conversation with multiple clients before, and I love that you mentioned mental prep because there is logistics to your point, and I do the same thing. It's funny you mentioned the four things. If I don't have my breakfast ready, if I don't have my breakfast and my lunch ready for the day, my outfit laid out, there's a couple things that just makes a morning smooth. That morning goes down like water. If I
Mhm.
miss those things, I'm discombobulated and the day just starts off chaotic. Obviously, I still get through my stuff, but it is not as comfortable as a morning. And I don't feel like that walk to work is not as enjoyable. Like I am like feeling a little spacey, right? And
You
that,
notice though that your like three or four things are very different from mine,
yeah,
right? And this is the part where I bet every single person like that exists has 3 to 5 of those things. They kind of overlap, right? Like there is a theme there. But one of the biggest things we can do as coaches is actually help people figure out like what are their 3 to 5 things? Like
yeah,
what are your specific 3 to 5 things? Like for me, lunch is not that big of a deal because well, I'm at home, I'll figure something out. There's a kitchen there. I can cook from scratch if I want to. I'll make a freaking quiche at 2 p.m. Right? But what are your unique sets of logistical
yeah.
issues?
Yeah, and then when I don't do them, like here's the funny thing is about the human mind, there's been nights before when I'm so tired that
Oh
I'm
my gosh, yes.
it'll be fine tomorrow. Tomorrow will be different. I'll figure it out. And I've never figured it out smoothly. It's almost like it's like paying with a credit card with a high interest rate. It's like,
Mhm.
yeah, I'll pay for it tomorrow. Like that 19% interest,
And
I'll
you think,
fine
you know
tomorrow.
what? That's actually interesting because I bet there is a little mental reframe here in kind of what you're sharing, right? Because this thing at night where it's like, I'm so tired, tomorrow will be different. You have enough evidence, and so do all of us, to
Yeah.
know that it won't be different. And it actually, like this, I'm not saying this to muscle through and do it anyway,
Yeah, yeah.
but rather, like, if we can actually say, like, oh, it's going to be like, I just want my morning to be like to go well tomorrow. I'm going to muscle through and get it done. But if I am truly exhausted and tired and I just don't want to, then all I have to do is acknowledge and make peace with a
Yeah.
consequence, right? It's like, you know what? It's fine. I'll just figure it out tomorrow. Tomorrow is going to be chaos, and that's fine because I will deal with chaos then because at least I'll sleep, right? And notice the difference there. Like, I'm not going to figure it out and expect it to be different. No, I know exactly what's going to happen tomorrow. I'm going to run from like end to end like a chicken with a head cut off. I'm going to start the day irritable. But sometimes that's okay. It's like this is back to objective view of reality, right? Like I reserve full right to eat a full bag of chips for dinner, and I know exactly how shitty I'm going to feel after. That's okay. Like I own it.
What you're basically saying, like, because I've done what you're saying before, and it is better because you're
Yeah,
mindfully accepting chaos as
that's right.
opposed to delusionally thinking that the outcome is going to be different this time. And I've
Yeah,
done that before. And again, it's funny how you can have a different relationship with the exact same experience based on your expectations. Where
100%.
if I
You
am mindfully
feel
accepting chaos, I'm like, you know what? I made my bed and I'll happily lay in it because I just couldn't do it last night. But in
do
the
it.
other world, I'm like, I made my bed and I'm like pissed off in it because I thought that I made wasn't going to be the bed. I'm like, I made my damn bed. Like there is a huge value to that. And like, I think as a coach, that's also valuable to bring to a client's awareness too. Sometimes is, hey, like that is also something you can do. You can do that, but just be, I love how you put it of, you want them to accept reality and help them come to an understanding of what it's going to be. You can have 10 beers and like wake up tomorrow and go to work, but like you should accept the consequences of that. I'm not here to stop you from doing that and like hold you away from it, but I'm here to inform you of the consequences of those actions, as opposed to, you know how you feel and you have the evidence of how you feel when you don't do that and you get to bed early, etc.
Well, it's like I said, like the human brain hates to fail. And like you want to fail once or twice. Because if you just kind of say, like, I'm too tired, I don't want to do it, that's once. But if you're also expecting yourself to somehow behave differently tomorrow and you won't, that's twice.
Yeah.
Right? So it's just like, I'd rather fail once than twice.
Yeah. Have you ever had a client who couldn't really get through, or an example of a client who really couldn't get through the idea of failing at all? So the idea of failing once was like, oh, I'm never going to fail. But they have the evidence of like, well, you're kind of failing consistently because you keep setting yourself up for failure.
Well, I mean, everyone fails. I think so. There's plenty of people who are like allergic to the notion of failure.
Yeah.
Uh, but those are ironically the same people who keep setting unrealistic goals that make failure inevitable.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, do you hate failure or are you in love with it?
Yeah.
You could have fooled me, right? Like the way you're setting yourself up is conveniently setting you up for failure again and again and again. So if you truly hate failure as much as you say you do, how about I help you actually set some freaking reasonable goals that you can succeed for once and see how that feels?
They're like the kid who's like, they're like, I hate that girl. And they're like, well, you seem to give her, I know you say you're picking on her, but you're giving her an obscene amount of attention. I think you have a crush on that girl. And they're like, no, I hate her. And it's like, I don't know about that. That's what they have, that relationship with failure, where they seem to not be able to stop getting into it because they set themselves up for failure, but then have that, as to your point, allergy of that failure.
Well, and it's a very human tendency, right? Like we get attached to certain stories. We get attached to our pain, right? And then there's all kinds of resistance for, just against maintaining momentum. Like we want to just keep doing what we're doing because there is a certain comfort in that, even though it's uncomfortable.
Homeostasis is a hell of a drug.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. It's
Is it
that.
ever?
Right? Like it is that. And it's so I taught a workshop just recently at my local gym. It was like a 4-week workshop for women, like teaching women how to lift. And it was fascinating because one of the questions that people asked, and these were beginners, right? Like it's really just like learning how to work with a barbell and all that. They were saying, so like, what's the best way? Like, what is the best warm up Like, what is the best exercise? And it's so fascinating because you kind of remember, you're like, yes, we always want to kind of get the best answer.
Yeah.
And at the same time, the best answer is not one answer. It's like, no, no, we got to keep changing the thing.
Yeah.
And it's the actual change that's so uncomfortable. Like, I feel that. I've been working out for 24 years. Every time I get a new training cycle, I'm like, oh, I just got comfy. I just figured out the movements. I just feel like I started progressing in the freaking whatever the thing is. And now I have to figure out movements all over again. And I feel like I'm starting over. It's that discomfort with just change as a human thing.
Yeah, 100%. And that is like a huge part of with helping with behavior change is accepting that it's going to be uncomfortable. But as you had mentioned before, you help someone build the best infrastructure possible. It ties in very well to it can suck, but we're just trying to turn down the suck knob as much as possible while accepting that change is going to be uncomfortable. But what can you do to make it, first of all, possible, right? Or likely, the most likely option. And that it's not so painfully horrible that you're like, you can come back. Where if you build that ecosystem, it will be inviting with repetition. But if you don't build that ecosystem, you basically have to rely on high octane motivation for everything you get done, which is unsustainable because you're not
Totally.
always going to be very motivated to get that done.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think the last thing I'll finish up with is like kind of tying it all in, right? So if someone is kind of stuck, kind of spinning their wheels right now, we've talked about a couple options, and they're stuck in that idea of like, you know what, they're trying to look for more complicated solutions to their problems. And this is obviously general advice, but what would you kind of help guide them and questions you would probe them with to be like, get them back to quote unquote the basics, but help them reframe it to understand how they're not just simply basic and why they're so valuable for them to actually implement.
So, suggestions I would have, right? Um, I think if anyone is considering a change that they've been like trying for a while, working on for a while, or maybe even thinking that they should be doing for a while, my biggest piece of advice would be to take whatever it is you think you should be doing,
Hmm.
divide it by a factor of 10, like 10 actually, right? Like you think you should be working out an hour a day? Great. Divide that by 10. So 6 minutes.
I
And
almost said 10 minutes.
do that.
That's horrible math.
You're just doing math in a way that like fits your biases. It's like more is better. Uh, 6 minutes.
Yeah.
Uh, and do that every day for 30 days. And experience a different kind of discomfort.
Oh,
Experience the discomfort that comes with having to do the damn thing every day. Experience the kind of discomfort where your brain is screaming at you that it's not enough. That's
I like that.
discomfort.
I
It's
like
well,
that. Damn. Because yeah, that's the killer of someone starting something is I've often seen someone, and I've done this. I'm not saying I've only seen people do it. You start something and you're so motivated that you go full out and you kind of bite off way more than you can chew. And then you keep saying, oh, more, 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 right? You're like this hungry ghost. You just keep feeding more. I got to do more workouts. I got to do this. But like, if I were to feel motivated and then do a little bit, that would be very uncomfortable because I'd be like, no,
yes.
I need to get every ounce of juice out of this orange as possible. And it's like, well, no.
Well, you're edging, right? For a month, right? It's just like, I want to go harder. It's like, well, that's too bad because we're going longer, not harder here, right? Like so, and just consider how new that would be.
Yeah, damn.
And consider how interesting it would be to be able to get to the end of that and succeed for once. Now, whatever goal or behavior or habit that you're already thinking of as you're listening to my voice right now is probably too big already, right? So keep shrinking. I think of I'll use the test, right? Like whenever you come up with whatever it is, it needs to make you go, that's it,
Yeah.
right? Like 6 minutes. Really?
Hmm.
6 minutes? If you're like thinking 15, like, oh, 15, okay, that's too big. Like it needs to make you go,
I like that.
That's how small it needs to be, right? So, and you can translate that into meditation, into eating vegetables. Like you want to eat more vegetables, great. What is vegetable goal? It's half a serving every day. Half a serving? Yes. Have you ever eaten half a serving of vegetables consistently for 30 days in a row? Maybe not, right? Like this is where you kind of consider where your baseline is and make the goal from there. But setting yourself up to succeed, not to fail. Imagine like if somebody gave you $1 million at the end, but you could set up the game, you could set up the rules. Wouldn't you set it up? And like, why would you pick an hour workout every day if you could pick 5 minutes instead? Of course you're going to pick 5 minutes. Make it easy on yourself. That's how, like, that's kind of like the level of difficulty here, because what you're exercising is the actual habit building. It's the actual habit formation and like the muscle of consistency. And there will be plenty of discomfort along the way, I promise.
That's why I had that reaction, because I was like, I thought about dividing a big goal of mine by 10 and then having to stop myself every day and be like, it's enough, dude, it's enough. Like that would be a massive learning experience, because I think people usually do the latter, where they like the opposite, where they go too much and then
That's right.
Your body stops them, right? Eventually you're just like, you're not doing this anymore, bud.
I remember a coach of mine told me once how everyone seems to be on this like tough guy periodization program. I'm like, what's tough guy periodization program? He goes, lift heavy, heavier, heavier, get injured, do nothing.
Yeah.
Lift heavy, heavier, heavier, get injured, do nothing, right? Like that's the tough guy periodization program. So what if you were to start pathetically light?
Okay.
Pathetically
Trademark that, Kate, immediately.
But this is what I call like setting pathetic goals. Like wimpy, like ridiculous to even talk about goals. It's like great, but if they're so pathetic and wimpy, then do it for 30 days. Like what's the
Cool. No, I love it. Yeah. If it's so pathetic, you can do it, right?
Do it.
I mean, if you can't do it, that's extra pathetic. And you don't want to be extra pathetic.
That's right. Nobody wants that.
Perfect.
Are you saying you're chicken and you can?
Yeah. Are you afraid? Are we negging our clients now? Oh, that's good. But okay. So thank you. That was awesome. There was a lot of things that made me think there, which was really cool. And I actually this went away. I didn't expect it to go with basics. So actually very happy with kind of the things we talked about, the ecosystem, talking about building that infrastructure, and kind of your approach to some of these were very thought-provoking answers. So thank you for your time. The last thing I'll say, last question is, where can people find you and how can people find your work?
Yeah, great question. I mean, no one can spell my last name, so I'm gonna always have to rely on Dylan to include this in the show notes. But I think best places to find me are my website, which is mylastname.com, and also my Instagram, which is K_my last name on Instagram. So we will link to both of those, and come find me and give me a shout.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you. I'll put both those in the show notes. And thank you for coming on. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, once again, thank you for listening to the 5 Elements podcast. If you are looking for online coaching, I am your guy. Unless you only want someone who's going to do, by all means necessary, even if it costs your health and mental health, weight loss, I'm not your guy. But if you want to build a stronger body, build more confidence in the gym, build better nutritional habits, even if you want to change your body composition and lose some weight, build some muscle, that's fine. I can help you with that. I am just not going to sacrifice your overall health for that goal, but I can definitely get you there in a sustainable way. And that's definitely what I specialize in. So if you are looking for remote coaching that is flexible, where you can get a customized program, nutrition coaching, and high level accountability, apply for online coaching. And you can find more details about that in the show notes. And make sure to like, share, subscribe, whatever it is with this episode, that you can get it out. I would really appreciate that if you enjoyed it. And I will see you next time. Cheers.